So this week we begin a new topic. We're going to be talking about conflict resolution. And as I mentioned before, in the devotionals here, I'd like to find something from the Old Testament, something from Jesus' teaching, and then something from Paul, and the rest of it, fall where it may. Looking at the Old Testament, it's interesting. I've been listening through the Old Testament. I use YouVersion, and I listen to Scripture as I drive. And recently just listened through the book of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah, at the very end of the book, Nehemiah says, "Moreover, in those days I saw men of Judah who had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod, or the language of one of the other people. They didn't know how to speak the language of Judah, Hebrew. I rebuked them. I called down curses on them. I beat some of them in. I pulled out their hair." So thinking about conflict resolution, that is one way to approach it. I don't want to be flippant here, but Scripture gives us examples. They're not all good examples, and here is one where at the end of the book of Nehemiah, after stellar leadership, I think Nehemiah misses the boat. Now, Scripture doesn't say this is how you should deal with conflict. It simply says that here is what Nehemiah did. Coming to the book of Proverbs, as Solomon talks, there are two verses that I do want to look at there. The first in Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 12. "Hatred stirs up dissension, but love covers over all wrongs." Very simple principle here. Conflict resolution, in my mind, is primarily about dealing with not necessarily sinful issues. It could be a sin against someone. Tomorrow we'll take a look at what to do when someone sins against you. But conflict can develop simply over different approaches, different points of view. Solomon says, hatred can cause conflict, but love can resolve it. Love covers over all wrongs. There's a basic difference there. Hatred is selfish by nature. Love thinks of the other person. Going into conflict resolution, think of the other person. This is repeated later in the book of Proverbs, chapter 28 and verse 25. "A greedy man stirs up dissension, but he who trusts in the Lord will prosper." Greed can also lead to conflict. Again, selfishness. Many times, conflict develops when we are looking in a selfish manner to our own good, to our own best interest. Solomon says one of the keys to resolving conflict is to change our hatred to love, change our greed to love, to look to the other person in the best interest of the other person. Another way of putting that, especially as it touches on conflict resolution, is seek first to understand rather than to be understood. When we seek to be understood, many times we can shut our ears to what's happening in the other person's life. But if we both seek to understand, many times that's all that's needed to resolve the conflict. So today, if you're involved in a conflict, try to understand the other person. Ask them what's going on. Ask them how you can help. God bless you. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow.